Okay, so first, I want to thank everyone for being here as always, but thank you so much to our special guest today, Alana Fairchild. Thank you for coming to the show.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me. I'm really happy to be here and to have a chance to talk with you.
Yes, so I have to say, first of all, I mentioned to you in the background, but I found you years ago because of your decks. And your decks are amazing. And so I just want to show people watching. The first that I found was the Isis Oracle. And because of that deck, I found Sacred Rebels, which we'll get into it in a bit. But the beauty is, fortunately, the decks led me to going to your site. And so I found that you do so much work with connecting to the sacred feminine and the divine feminine. So I wanted to start out with just asking you, what drew you into connection to the sacred feminine, and why is that so important?
I think it was a case of me being hit on the head a number of times by the universe and kind of falling inelegantly into it, and then not really knowing what it was that was happening. And I think it's not only me that's gone through this. I find that a lot of people that are going through a kind of initiation to the divine feminine, it's often one of the hallmarks that we really just all of a sudden don't know what on earth we're doing. Our plans start falling apart. There's a feeling that we don't really have the capacity to control, or we lose the desire to try and control everything, and we're kind of sensing some deeper intelligence and passion and desire and motivation and meaning that's sort of trying to arise from within, but it's almost like having a feeling of something that you don't yet have a real language for, or an understanding of it. So it was kind of this sense of me stumbling and trying to figure out why everything was falling apart. And I had enough of a sense of love and trust with the universe that I figured there was something good underneath it. But my goodness, it was difficult. There was just a long time where I really felt incredibly confused, and I had to turn to something. And the only thing that was really available to me at the time was a source of guidance, because everything had kind of shut down. The way I normally channeled, just, it's like a door just got closed. And so I had to work with my dreams. And that's often the way that, you know, the feminine can really speak to us, because it's not, there's no logic door that it has to get through. It's just the energy can start to come through, and the symbolism. And little by little, and it took me a long time, but I gradually began to understand through the dreams and through needing to work with dream images. Then all of a sudden I was very interested in music and dance, and I'd always loved that even as a child, but I'd never really thought about it deeply as a way of building and expressing and honouring one's own soul. So that all started to, and I became obsessed with colour medicine and just you know, everything, just vibrancy and different frequencies and essential oils, anything sensual and earthy that felt also healing. And that was it. I was in it then. She kind of had me, and then it was like a sense of being led into this beautiful world, because there's such a multiplicity in the divine feminine.
Well, it's really interesting to hear you say that, because one of the things I saw a video of you singing, and I have to say your voice, so beautiful, but even the way you were moving and the tone and the sound, it was just like you, this amazing energy coming through you, this expression that was coming through you. And I thought about your body of work that we're aware of in a more public sense, and I'm like, wow, it's amazing that you really allow this to move through you in so many different ways. So was it your own experience of going through whatever pushed you into that surrender? Is that why you started creating the books and the cards and all of these things to support other people?
Yeah, it's I remember once a music producer that I used to work for, he said that if he didn't write music, he felt like almost like creatively constipated or something like that. He was like, something had to kind of be released and he just had to do it. And I kind of relate. It's like, you know, a bird needs to fly and a tree needs to do what the tree, and I just need to let the creative flow come through. It's like a healer needs to heal. You've got to do it.
Right.
So it's quite an inner compulsion, but I think that also that's the nature of the divine feminine. It seeks to express something that feels real. And I think all of us in our own way, depending on our talents, you know, and what we're drawn to, but it is the part of us that feels this deep compulsion to be or do something authentic, and it's just, it often doesn't make sense. People might not understand it around us. There might not even really be a feeling that there's any place for our voice or what it is that we want to share, but nonetheless we just feel, if I don't do this, it's like the real me is being boxed up and put aside, and I can't tolerate that. I just have to, you know, to let it out. And I think that's the feminine, you know, she's real and she wants to let it come through.
Well, that's another thing I wanted to ask you about, because even though you have even some decks that aren't necessarily focused on the divine feminine or a particular goddess, although many are, which again, I want to ask you about, you have other inspirations that come through as well, right? But with the goddesses in particular, do they come to you? Were they coming in your dreams, or were you calling to them like, please support me in whatever cycle I'm going through?
For me, I feel like all of these different projects and inspirations and these particular divine beings have called me, and I've been quite clueless. And I don't say it in a bad way. Like, I just, you know, I'm la-da-da, and I go, I float through my life, and I don't always realize until later when things come together just how much those divine beings have been like placing breadcrumbs path. But there is also, I think, something incredibly legitimate when, you know, we feel drawn to a particular being, like Tara, for example, who I just love, and I feel that she's been with me forever. But this lifetime, you know, I really did just feel drawn to her, but not really know much about her, and I had to kind of learn. I was following my own passion really for this beautiful divine being, and then learned there's this whole world about her, and she's amazing. But I didn't know any of that at the time. So it's kind of organic. I think we all have a seed within our hearts of certain things that we're supposed to discover and express, and they're already there. And then whether or not it seems like we're chasing it or it's chasing us, it's kind of landscape. It's you know, but the seed is what's really the thing that matters.
Well, it's funny because that's actually how I found you again. So I was, I've always felt this resonance with Egyptian energy, even at a very young age, but never researched. And then when I started doing this work, I started seeing and sensing the goddess Isis around me. So I started researching her. And at the time I was also getting acquainted with Oracle. So that's where I found the Isis Oracle. And I just want to show how beautiful these cards are. But one of the things about your decks, the two that I have, that are so different than a lot of other decks, is not only can they be used for reading, yes, but they're really like healing decks. Yes. So, you know, it's so interesting how this one in particular has rituals and incantations, and then the Sacred Rebels, which I love too. It has a section of healing process, and just look at the beauty in these cards, my gosh. But what I wanted to know from your lens, it's not just a reading deck. What inspired you to put so much support in what you wrote?
I think my underlying philosophy, and I've never really thought about, it's just always been there, but you know, life is this beautiful, crazy, mysterious gift, and I feel that we, you know, our spirit comes into a body and takes this life journey to grow and to heal and to become awakened. And I really do believe in the depths of my heart that our spiritual destiny is all the same. You know, we take these remarkably unique pathways to it, but we're all returning home to the awakened essence and the beauty of our being inside. And so to me, anything that happens in our lives, even if it seems to be about our work or our health or money or love, it's all part of the learning that serves that. So healing to me is kind of the whole point.
Right.
And healing is not just the work, it's also things becoming more gracious and more open and more beautiful. And you know, being human can be really tough. It's sort of an advanced spiritual school. So I think if there are ways that I can bring through divine beauty to uplift and resonate and remind people of what they really are beneath, which has nothing to do with all the games that, you know, the mind and the ego play in the world. All of that stuff is just, you know, fodder, nothing more than fodder for the spiritual path. And we get caught up in it sometimes, and it's so just depressing and ugly and horrible. It's like, oh my God. So I want to help alleviate that. And I think there's something really beautiful about feeling that we can be empowered to do some of our own healing on ourselves and for others. Because I do believe, you know, if you have a heart, you have the potential to have a healing channel. You know?
Yes. And that's one of the things I love even about these decks and Oracle overall, is it, to me, seems to give us these mirrors, right? That help reveal what it is that we're holding on to. But again, you have, your books are so rich with information that really bring people into a space of self-reflection, but also I think things that we may want to judge, the way that you write, it really brings us again into some different level of understanding and teaching people or guiding them into sitting with themselves. So again, like, these decks are beautiful, and I can't wait, you know, to hear about the latest one actually. But I wanted to ask you that too. How do you do it? I mean, do you just allow yourself to go with how you're inspired to create in all the different ways that you do?
Yeah, I'm really lucky in that my publisher, Blue Angel, is just, I mean, we have a very unusual relationship. So he will just, Tony, who is the head of Blue Angel, who's also an artist and a writer himself. So he kind of understands that creative world. He's not just coming from a business perspective, although he has very good business instincts, but he just lets me really trust my process. And spirit, you know, I didn't realize when I started, but it makes sense now that I think about it. Spirit really seems to have an understanding of what needs to come through when, and the order of certain decks. And, you know, even I've recently just finished writing one dedicated to the goddess Kali, and I'm really excited about it. But oh my, it was huge. I tell you, there's a lot of relationship stuff that just did not survive me writing that deck. It just got cleared away. And
Right.
been beautiful and healing. But the funny story with that is that the artist who's been creating the work for it is the same artist that did the work for the Isis Oracle. Okay. We asked him years ago if he'd be interested. He's like, no. And then I thought, okay, well, the right artist hasn't come yet, I guess. So I just had to wait. And there were other things and other decks that happened. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, my publisher said, let's ask him again. And we said, oh, I don't know if you remember this, it was years ago. And he said, oh yeah, I'd love to do that. And then it all just came together. And I just thought, I don't know if I would have been ready to write that any earlier. You know, I have to go on a huge process to bring this stuff through, because I want it to be authentic. You know, I really, truly have experienced and connected with everything that I write. There's no point me just talking about, you know, wouldn't it be nice if this was the case? Like, you know, no, it has to feel real. You have to feel, I think, a sense of trust if you're going to go on this journey and someone's going to be guiding you.
Right.
I feel like I've gone on so many tangents there. I'm so sorry.
No, it's beautiful. And it's funny. This is how my mind goes too. So I'm right here with you. Yeah, I'm right here with you. Yeah. And it's interesting. Once I was, you know, directed to more of your work and seeing how, you know, the goddess energy and the decks that you have that are more focused on the sacred feminine, but then you have some works that seem more whimsical. Like, I know you have like a circus deck, and then you have one that is it the Earth Wisdom?
Earth Warriors, yes.
Earth Warriors, yeah. And it has even like a completely different type of energy. So I was so curious about that, like how you just allow. There must be some level of allowance. And is that what goes on with you?
Yeah, there is. I mean, I like it because I think about any woman, like, and this is not to put men aside because they have this as well, but women are just, you know, so how many women do you know that are one thing?
Right.
They're not, right? They're just, Yeah, we're talking about the divine feminine. You know, she is everything. She's sweet and she's tender, and you mess with her and she's a fierce tigress and you just like cower, you know, in fear as she rises up, and she's, you know, flirty and she's serious and she'll love you with all of her heart and she's devoted and passionate, and then she just, you know, doesn't want anything to do. She just needs her space and you can all just go away, and she's everything. And it's,
Right.
I think the divine is all things, and there's something in this work and the diversity of it that really appeals to me, because it's sort of the divine playing this lovely game with us, saying, you know, do you need vitamin C or vitamin B or vitamin this or that? Or, you know, it's just, it doesn't have to be constrained to one way. And different times in our life, we need different energies and different support. And I think the permission to allow the divine to be as creative as it wants to be. I mean, imagine if Mother Nature just made one flower.
Right.
I'm sure it'd be beautiful, but, you know, she can make lots of them and we can enjoy, you know, bird of paradise. We've got things sticking out and the lavender and a polite daisy, and they're all beautiful, but they're all her and they're all her creation, but they're all unique and they have different functions. And I think with the work, I really hope that, you know, when people experience the different aspects, that they trust what they're drawn to, but if they're drawn to different elements and different things, that they can allow that to be part of their own soul journey, you know, and not kind of feel that they have to be locked into, you know, just being spiritual like this. How horrible. It's another, you know, it's another constraint. We already have constraints. I think less. We need less, especially on the spiritual path.
No, I agree. And I noticed too, you have a lot coming up in 2020. So I want to ask you about some of these things, but what you're saying now reminds me of what I read about your Kuan Yin Transmission, which I hope you can tell us about. But is that why even in that there are different goddesses represented because of the different facets of ourselves?
Yes, and the different traditions. I mean, they all come from a different tradition and different parts of the world, different cultures. And I think, you know, one of the things that I love about living in certain parts of Australia is it's very multicultural. So, and even when I was a little girl, I grew up in a primary school that had, you know, 5 or 6 different religious traditions, and that's just what I knew. And it wasn't until I started traveling and I realized that that kind of natural exposure to diversity is not always so readily available. And I just got so much out of it. I found it interesting, not off-putting, and I found that there was beauty in different types of music and different types of food and different ways, you know, different ideas about what's beautiful and how to dress. It was just really fascinating. And there's something, I think, very healing about being open to difference in a way that you don't feel threatened, because you value your own kind of traditions and your own spirit, you know, and your own soul, but you can recognize that, you know, you might be really enriched by something different coming in. Again, I've gone off on a tangent. I can't remember what you said.
No.
Oh, the Kuan Yin. Sorry. The Kuan Yin transmission. So there's an element of unity through diversity. And I think, you know, I really celebrate that, just the range and the uniqueness of every being. And at the same time, I truly believe that we all have the same spiritual essence within our hearts. And I think that's we can have so much in common and be so different and so unique. I just think it's gorgeous. And to recognize that, I think, brings us closer to each other without having to create that culture of fear that demands that everyone fits in a stereotype or behaves in a certain way. I mean, that's just, it's constraining to the soul, and the soul loves freedom. It needs to be what it is, whether other people get it or expect it or not.
That is beautiful. So can you tell us then what inspired this, the Kuan Yin Transmission, and can you tell us a little bit about what it is and who it's for?
Yeah, so it was really a divine project that I was sort of led into over the years, and it all culminated when I took a group of people from all over the world, actually, but we went to Tibet and climbed up. It was crazy, the altitude, and I was like half in my body and half out of my body going, oh, this is really difficult. But I had a dream of this beautiful heavenly lake. And when I woke up from that dream, I had a voice in my head saying, Google it. So I Googled Heavenly Lake, and there was the lake from my dream. And I thought, it's an actual place, I have to go. So that led to taking this group, and we went to Tibet, and finally we were at this lake, which is considered to be a kind of goddess in the Tibetan folk tradition. And standing at that lake, which I described this in great depth, it was this whole experience, but it was a beautiful vision of Kuan Yin and Mother Mary and this kind of interaction of all these different energies. And that was the moment where I kind of felt like I got zapped. And then I came back down the mountain literally and wrote the book. So that's the Kuan Yin Transmission book that's just come out. And then from that book, there is this training that I'll be doing in person. And essentially I'm quite excited about it because it's quite different to what I've done before. But it's essentially using my energetic connection with these divine beings and kind of giving like it's a transmission, that's why it's called that, but like a zap, a seed, an awakening, a stimulation, almost like if you had two tuning forks and you were kind of igniting one. So I'll be there going, oh, like this, and then that same divine frequency, which I believe is in all of us, will be stimulated in the people that I'm working with in each sitting. And guidance has sort of said, you need to do it in person because it's a physical, it happens from body to body, but it's energy.
Right.
And then from that person can begin to have and develop their relationship directly with those divine beings like I experience. And I've got to tell you, Yolanda, it's so just beautiful and incredibly enriching. It's one of the most beautiful things, if not the most beautiful thing in my life. So for me to be able to share that and facilitate for others to have that experience themselves, I just want to do that everywhere. I want to share it everywhere.
I can imagine. So it sounds like even an initiation of sorts. And when you work with people in this way, do you find that they are, I guess, initiated or connected with even the energy of these specific goddesses, or does it even go beyond them and whomever may feel resonant to the people you're working with?
Yes, it's exactly that. Yes, because all of these divine faces, they're kind of like facets of a crystal, but it's all the one crystal. So it's sort of, so if someone, and it happens in my work now, I can be doing a meditation and really bringing through one of the facets of the divine. And I always say to people, whoever comes through to you, go with that, because there's no judgment. Why would I say to people you must do it this way? It's the opposite of what it's about. So sometimes you get people sitting there and Archangel Michael or someone will connect with Jesus, or an ascended master of some sort, or the Buddha, or any Pele. You never know.
So, but you are going to travel, and people have an opportunity to meet with you in person for this.
Yes, yeah. I thought about doing it online, but some things I can do, like I have an online training program. It goes for a year. It's all conducted online, and it's strong, and people grow through it, so it works. But there was something about this that guidance said, no, it has to be that they'll only get it if you have to be in the room. So I guess it's like saying, it's different to imagining a tuning fork to actually you've got to feel maybe one day I'll be able to just, I don't know, meditate at home and just send it out. But I'm not there yet, so I've got to be in the room. And so I'll be traveling and sharing it from next year onwards. And I will have details on the website probably early next year, which will have some locations where we'll start the ball rolling.
That's very cool. Of course, I'm going to put the website in the show description for everyone, but just to let you know now, if you go to alanafairchild.com, you can get information on all of the work, all of the events. You do all of these sacred types of events. And again, on top of what you are creating artistically, I have to ask too, do you sing regularly, publicly?
I do normally in events, but I'm starting to bring through a little bit more music. I'll be working on a very, very special new project at the end of this year, which I'm excited about. And the album with the Kuan Yin Transmission, there's an album of meditation, but also a music CD with mantra, which I'll be using in the transmission workshops itself. I've sort of been juggling between appearing and writing, and I have done some music. There's also like a Divine Circus album, and I've just finished a little mini Sacred Rebels album, which so people can dance around their lounge room and feel, connected to themselves. And So I'll be sharing that next year as well.
I will definitely be looking for that one. I have to say, with the Sacred Rebels deck, it's one of those decks for years I've used, especially for my self-connection. You know, it's I do a lot of self-work with this deck, not necessarily, you know, to read other people. So I've gifted it to other people for that same reason. And I love this deck so much. And then this year, it's funny, I've had the Isis Oracle for years, but it was this year that it really jumped out at me. And so I've been building a relationship more with this deck. So thank you. Yeah.
I think things speak to us at different times. It's really interesting how it happens. I'm really feeling the goddess Isis more too. In fact, I'm taking a retreat to Egypt in, when is it? About a year from now. It's in October 2020. And that just came through really strongly, you know, that now's the time, and we'll be working with a number of Egyptian energies, but especially like Isis at the heart of it. She's just so beautiful and such a badass, and so,
Yes.
so much about dignity and grace and feminine kind of strength within men and in women, you know, within the deep human heart, and being able to hold that no matter how much rubbish is going on in the world around, and sometimes downright toxic stuff, and just being able to stay in the truth of your purity and your dignity, I think is really important. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah, I saw that, and I wanted to ask you about that as well, so people know, because this is a retreat that people can sign up for and come with you. So is it going to be centered around Isis? Is it one of those things you're going to go and see actually what happens transmission wise?
So we'll be visiting different temples and different sacred places, including ones dedicated to Isis. But I'm also going to explore some of the energies of the sacred masculine and how it relates to her story. So I'm quite passionate about, you know, these two aspects, the sacred feminine and the sacred masculine, and just, I think they're so important in their relationship, and it's just finding that space. Sometimes we need to focus on one, sometimes the other. So it'll definitely be a sacred feminine retreat, but those masculine elements will be there. And it's funny because it's been a mixture of men and women, still more women than men, but there are men that are enrolling in this, whereas I've done retreats in the past, like one to the goddess Lakshmi in India, and it was all women from all over. And it's just, it's funny, people sense at some level what's needed for them, I think, on their journey. And I think men, I mean, we want our beautiful brothers on the path with us, you know, awakening and healing and finding their own unique path, which is different, I think, to a woman's path of awakening, but just as important.
Yeah, it's interesting too. I think a lot of events I go to, again, it's mainly primarily women, but the men that are there, it's amazing how open they are.
Yeah,
you know,
you'd have to have some confidence, wouldn't you?
Yes.
Rock up to the Shakti temple and say, I'm here, I don't know.
No, absolutely. So I wanted to ask you about what you just mentioned a moment ago. I didn't want to go by it because when I got your decks, I had no idea that there was an opportunity to actually work with you. And again, with the detail of your books, I mean, I would have been all over that with the healing that you write so beautifully in the books. So could you talk a little bit about your online healer program? And is that the same as the SGSM?
Yes. So
Okay.
that's the same. So SGSM basically stands for Soul Guidance and Sacred Mentoring. And that's a year long. It sort of runs from February to mid-November, end of November every year. And we'll be in our 5th year this year coming for 2020. And it's beautiful. It's sort of, I had no idea what to expect. It's essentially 4 modules, and it works with the first 3 crystal books, so Crystal Angels, 444, Crystal Masters, 333, and then Crystal Goddesses, 888, and then the last module is kind of bringing it together. And it's a combination of personal healing and self-development, and then also being trained, if you want to, as a healer, to do these particular modalities that use those books and use the Crystal Mandala Oracle in order to hold space for others. And you can facilitate group sessions, one-on-ones, or workshops using this material. We've had some great feedback, like just these astonishing things that happen. And I think it's because, you know, I had no idea when I was writing this material that eventually I'd be doing that. So,
Right.
I never really know, what's happening. I only know what to do in just the moment, and then I go with it. But I think because there's so much purity in my own love and heart connection with spirit, that comes through. And so when people do the work, that's what comes through. And it's just, I'm blown away by it, you know. It's so amazing. Yeah.
And again, the way that it expresses through you and in so many different channels. I mean, it's really amazing when you look at your body of work and what you're doing. So I have to ask too, was this always your path, or did you have like a totally different life before coming into this work and what you've created?
I tell you, it's a funny thing. When I was really quite little, I remember having these different fantasies about what I wanted to do with my life. And I realized they've all kind of come true. But one was like, I want to be a librarian. And then I wanted to be a teacher. I wanted to be singing and dancing. And then there was something else. Oh, yeah, and I wanted to be a martial arts person working with energy. Anyway, I kind of do all of that now. But there was a period in between where I really went through, it was kind of my initiation into a lot of struggle and a lot of suffering. And I think it was one of my definitely most difficult times in my life, where I felt incredibly lost and really disconnected at some emotional level from believing that it was even possible. I mean, when I started, this is, you know, going back a couple of decades, no one really talked about singing, dancing, spiritual teachers. It wasn't even, you know, on any of the careers posters. You know, the closest I ever get to anything was journalist. And I was like, I don't know if I want to be a journalist. I think I lack the, you know, the killer instinct to be to be a journalist. I don't know. But anyway, it didn't really resonate. So I was lost. I didn't really know what to do, and I had depression and struggling with a lot of emotional issues from childhood and all of that, and having to work through all of that. And it was such an education on just the difficulty of the human experience. And I look back and I wouldn't wish what I went through on anyone, but I can honestly say that a lot of it really gave me the foundation to know what it is that people need, because I figured out what I needed in order to heal. So it was a lot of my my training, really. And then at the end, I went to law school and hated it, and just, you know, but I finished. And then right towards the end, a girlfriend of mine said, "I'll go and see this psychic reader." And I remember I'd never seen her before, and she was swanning about in some lovely floaty dress, and she had a like psychic store with you know, all new age books and crystals. And I just walked in there and I thought, you know, compared to a law office with those horrible stuffy books. And look, I'm not writing off. Some people love law and it's their path and they're great at it. But it was painful for me. It was like, you know, square peg, round hole, all that. But I went into this store and I feel like I'm at home. And then I had a reading with her and she just said, "You're an old soul and you're a healer and a teacher." And no one had ever said anything like that to me before. I was about, I don't know, 18 years old or something, 19 years old. And this voice came out of my mouth that I'd never heard before. And I just said, "I know. And that's what I'm going to do." And I was like, where the hell were you for the past, like, you know, how many years? I've been flailing about. And that was the beginning. I finished uni and I studied with her meditation, psychic healing for about 2 years. And even within the first few months, I was doing tarot readings, and that was it. You know,
Right.
the universe just gives me a breadcrumb and I turn it into a feast. I'm like, oh, thank God, you know, oh, there's a sign of hope, and I just go after it. So I kind of stumbled into it when the time was right.
I think that's very inspiring to hear in a lot of ways, especially the part about the struggle that you went through, because a lot of people come into this work in that same type of way. And it can feel very like there's no way out. What is happening to me? Am I dying? What's going on? And it really struck me that you said you were getting an education. And it's one of those things a lot of us don't realize until hindsight, you know, looking back, it's like, oh, yes, and I wouldn't have understood any other way, right? So I thank you for sharing that, because I think it does. That inspires anyone who may be going through it right now.
Oh, yeah, it's so important that we don't turn away, and that we have some sense that things will get better, because they will.
Right.
And I often say too, you know, one of the ways that you know an old soul is usually because of the amount of stuff that they have to deal with. And often, not for every person, but for a lot of old souls, it starts quite early. And so they can kind of be struggling or feeling like they have to change themselves to become worthy of love or to fit in or to be successful. And it can take a long time to undo that and to actually have the courage to say, well, what would happen if I'm just myself and if I don't try to change? And if, you know, you weren't really raised with a sense of that, mirrored that that's okay, which most of us aren't, because our society generally is still quite oppressive and quite fear-driven. So, you know, you have someone that says, oh, what if I don't go by the system? Everyone goes, oh my God, what did you say? No, don't do that. And it just takes that kind of moment. And sometimes, you know, it's not until we really have a lot of stuff kind of bearing down on us that there's some part of us that suddenly just finds that inner sacred rage, I call it, where you just say to the universe, enough! I'm ready to find my way out. No more.
Inner sacred rage. I love it. And it's funny. The Sacred Rebels deck, what really drew me to the deck was just the title. I was like, Sacred Rebel, yes. And that's what drew me in. And who knew, like, the beauty of this deck that would, you know, be in the box. But there's something about you too that screams community. And I imagine with the type of groups that you facilitate and even the work that you've shared, like the upcoming events that you have, sounds like it's group work. So have you found have like a different texture in allowing people to be seen in these states of transformation that helps on their journey?
Yeah. You expressed yourself so beautifully. I just wanted to say.
Thank you.
Yeah, I do really feel that group energy is quite special. There's something amazing about what happens when you're in a space and you're heart connected. Just old family programming can just suddenly, it's like the wind gets taken out of the ego sails in a lot of ways, and you can experience what it's like to just be seen and loved and held in a space. And I think, you know, human beings, we still, even if we are quite individual by nature, we still, you know, we belong to an ecosystem. We're not designed to be somehow separate from everything. We really do need that community holding. And even for me, and I'm quite a hermit in a lot of ways, I like a lot of space to create, but I take great delight in the community gatherings. I just think they're the most beautiful thing. That chance to be in that energy and to share it. And what I love about it is it amplifies everything. Now, when I was first starting, that was difficult because it amplifies also the shadow. People's stuff can come up, and like it takes a little while to figure out how to hold that so that you're aware of it, but you don't unintentionally empower it.
Right.
You hold the energy to bring through something that's actually going to cleanse and release that. And it can be done, but it took me probably about 17 years of teaching to be able to kind of in my being figure out how to handle that. But it's beautiful. Group energy is powerful, and it helps. It's like a choir. The sound that comes through, it can be really deeply resonant and help to shift things that no matter how amazing we are, we just can't quite handle on our own. And I think that teaches humility and grace. We need it. We can't do it on our own.
Oh, really, truly.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful analogy. It's like a choir. It's funny. It reminds me of, again, reading your words. I mean, the way you articulate things, it just strikes something inside where you really get it. And everyone that I've gifted your deck to, one friend in particular was like, oh my gosh, tell her how much I love this deck. I said, I promise I will let her know if I could, get past my own excitement around it. But one of the things I wanted to ask you too, because even though you do have these other decks, and I want to ask you about the White Light Oracle as well, is there a reason that you have, not even just a reason, why is this connection to the sacred feminine so important for all of us?
I think that's a really good question. And I've been reflecting on this quite a bit lately as I'm kind of sensing that that's the emphasis of where the work's going. And even the things that don't seem like they're immediately related to the divine feminine, like the Divine Circus Oracle, it's still very much her nature, because that deck is kind of finding the conscious capacity for healing playfulness, irreverence, being able to just say to the system, I see you and you can just bugger off and I'm doing my own thing here. With love, do it if you need to, but I'm not going to get caught up with it. It's just And that's her as well. You know, the sacred feminine is really the liberating energy. But I think, you know, I was reflecting on it and I realized I think it's because humanity as a whole is going through a birthing. It's kind of, it's chaos, but think about what happens when a woman gives birth. You know, I mean, with the exception of a few very lucky ones that just go in and go plop and the whole thing's done in 3 seconds, it's generally kind of more of a, you know, there's, you know, husbands or boyfriends' hands being grabbed going, why did you do this to me? And they're screaming and there's, you know, blood and it's mess and it's life and it's crazy and it's intense and it's all of the energy that's required to bring something through. And I think humanity at a spiritual level is going through something like this, a kind of birthing process spiritually. And we can't birth without the feminine. That is her art and her particular talent and her capacity. She can hold the space for us to be able to be in the chaos of our own private growth, you know, because when we're growing, things are difficult and we're at our edge and then we're moving past our edge and we don't know what we're doing and we feel like we're stuffing it up, but we're making great leaps on the path and leaving the familiarity behind. It's beautiful, but it's often not very elegant, especially when we're figuring it out. Then we become more masterful and we do the next thing. But we need that feminine to kind of hold us and to give us that strength of containment. Otherwise, it's like trying to make a salad with no bowls. There's stuff everywhere and, no, you know, you don't get the meal at the end. You just get mess. So we need her. And I think that's happening individually and I think it's happening in many cultures and I think it's happening, you know, globally for humanity. So my sense is that's why. And also we have to be careful with technology. You know, it has so many potential gifts for reaching and connecting, and we just have to make sure that we have enough wisdom to remain connected to our bodies, which the sacred feminine also does, that we can recognize when something might seem like a good idea in theory, but it's just stupid. You know, don't do that. When you need to connect with people, don't be on your phone talking to someone else. Like just little things where you kind of go, you know, what does my body need? How do I need to be to relate, to feel authentic connection? Without that, it's like trying to grow a garden with no fertilizer, no rain and no sunlight. Like everything's going to die. So we have to, you know, have that sense of something that's going to keep us on the affirming the path of life and authenticity of the being. And I think sacred feminine energy is essential for that.
I love so much that you mentioned with that the divine circus oracle is also a facet of the divine feminine, because it points back to what you said even a moment ago about the different facets of the divine feminine. And I think a lot of times where, you know, people connect with different goddess energies, we have them more segregated out, you know, and we may all put one face on what the divine feminine is and what that means. And so much of what you shared, hopefully people hear this and get this, is how multifaceted the divine feminine is. And she, and this energy, I guess I shouldn't just she, but the energy of this isn't contained to a box or just a small definition. So that's really beautiful too, that you are showing that through the work that you provide.
Yeah, I'm so glad. I really want people to feel that it's, you know, it speaks to them. And I think this is why there is the multiplicity. You know, we are all so different. It's, you know, we all emerge, I believe, from the one creative spiritual source. Of course, that source that loves us, you know, with this passionate tenderness and devotion is going to manifest in all different ways. It's not like it's going to go, well, I'm this, you fix yourself to meet me. It's you know, it's not some narcissistic, horrible, you know, it's love. So of course it's going to continually adapt and want to express itself in and take whatever form is necessary for us to feel connected. You know, it's like the beautiful parent that if the child's in a mood and, you know, might be sympathetic at first and that doesn't work, and then it might be a little bit like, no, come on now, and that's not working. You're thinking, what can I do? And then all of a sudden, you know, finger puppets and it's you know, getting a smile, or it's just that continual desire to reach. And I think, you know, even with the diversity of the work, if people even have a small sense of that from my incessant desire to keep, you know, giving you things that might help and benefit in some way, then that's a small taste of what the divine will do for us. It's a completely different mindset to the fear-based, disconnected striving, that we're fed through mainstream media.
Right.
It's very deadening and very fear-inducing, unnecessarily so.
It's so true. Well, I know I can't have you all night. Well, it's night for me. I know it's not for you. But I have to ask you about one of your more recent decks, the White Light Oracle. And also if you could talk about the apps that you have. Oh, that's beautiful.
An advanced copy, so it's like the first one on them. Yeah, I'm really excited about it. Sorry, and the apps.
Yes, but the deck. So what is this deck about? And
so this, I don't know if you can see it properly. I haven't got it.
That's beautiful.
So I was at a spiritual festival many years ago, and a lovely woman came up to me and she said, have you thought about doing a deck with the art of Andrew Gonzalez, who's the artist? And I instantly knew who she meant, because I'd seen his work years and years ago when I was really struggling with depression. And I remember when I saw his work at the time, feeling like it was some kind of sensual but spiritual, ecstatic but grounded. It was just delicious. And it really, just looking at his imagery at that time in my life, really fed my soul with something that I couldn't explain. And then all these years later, this woman reminding me, and I thought, I would love to do that. And I didn't really know what the deck would be about, but I had White Light Oracle in my head instantly. And I thought, okay, well, that might be a working title. It might change. Like Sacred Rebels, I wrote 3 times and didn't know what the title was until the very end. So I thought maybe it's one of these. But we approached the artist, and he was keen. And then I sat down to write it, and it took me a while for it to percolate, but I realized it was all about the kind of underlying bliss and the ecstatic nature, and how to kind of connect with that spiritual nourishment that bliss energy brings without disconnecting from the struggles and the things that are part of our life. It's sort of like it can be this beautiful baseline of our being that we drop into. It's like we're out in the world and things, you get a bit dry and you drop down into the fountain, and it's just sort of there. And so it's all about connecting with these really just beautiful energies. I'm so sorry.
Oh, it's okay.
These beautiful energies that cross multiple traditions. And one of the things that happened with this, which I wasn't expecting, but all of these sound frequencies came through. So it was like Bastet of 174 hertz and Seraph of 963, and I was fascinated, and I thought, wow, is it going to like code into the cards? And I'm really like quite excited about that. So I was sort of writing about the different frequencies, and then there's one called epsilon modulation, so it's sort of brain waves were coming. It was all this like really, it was totally blew me away. It was very cosmic to write, and then just pulling it all together. So it's really, I'm really intrigued to see how people are going to respond to it, actually. I never really know till later, until I hear from people and what it does for them, exactly what Spirit was up to.
So there's 2 things I want to ask you, because I know you have to go. One, I would love to know, from your point of view, how Oracle can support us, especially if there are people listening that have never used Oracle before. Like, how can it be of use? But I also wonder, from the time the first deck you ever created till now, do you notice a difference in how people are connecting with the energy of the decks and how they are translating?
Yes, I think that there's definitely an awakening in humanity. And I mean, the first deck, the Kuan Yin deck, I wrote, I think it was in 2011 or thereabouts. So in the past, actually that's the beginning of a decade, isn't it, really? In that past sort of almost 10 years period, there's been a really strong awakening. And I mean, think about what happens in our personal awakening. You start to do healing and stuff comes up. And I think that's what's happening on the planet. Stuff's coming up. So yes, there's definitely a different response, and people are going deeper, and the energy that is coming through is stronger, which makes me very happy, because the energy that comes through is beautiful. But for those that haven't really worked with an oracle or are wondering how it supports, there's something very special about the combination of word and imagery with healing intention. And I think, we are fed imagery nearly constantly, and a lot of it isn't particularly inspired. In fact, if you think about the nature of the images that we're we're fed through advertising, for example, it's pretty much always, why aren't you like this? Buy this and you will be. And it's like, you know, that's not enough to just make you completely depressed, and you're constantly
Right.
fed these images. And there's something about sacred imagery, which all of my decks, I'm very careful about what artists I work with and that they hold a certain vibration in their work. It's meant to be nourishing. And I think one of the reasons that these decks are just so healing is that there is this, not only the intention, but the energy that comes through. It's very real and it's very accessible. And it's why you can hold one deck and another, and they feel, even just holding them energetically, they feel completely different, because they are.
Yes.
But yeah, I think the soul has its own way of growth, and it's a little bit like a beautiful plant. If you give it rain and you give it sun, it knows what to do. You know, it doesn't have to be told, grow this, you know, do this, put the root. It knows.
Right.
So the decks are kind of like giving that light and that warmth and that emotional nourishment that the soul needs, and then it's enough, you know, for it to take it in, and then it's stimulated by these natural energies to do what it knows how to do, which is
That is
grow
beautiful.
and become what we are, in essence.
That is really, really beautiful. And you just made me think of how I said I had the Isis Oracle for a very long time. And then there was a time where I felt very drawn to, and a lot of people say that, how do I choose the right deck? And a lot of people will say, like, you know, there's this resonance with the energy of the deck. So that's beautiful. So I wanted to ask, because we've covered a lot of what you do, but not everything. So again, people can go to alanafairchild.com and learn about the Kuan Yin Transmission, the online healing, and the trip to Egypt, the Egypt retreat, which I'm going to look into. But I wanted to know, would you recommend that people read the book that you mentioned, whether or not they're interested in, you know, taking the class, but definitely if they want to do the Kuan Yin Transmission, should they read the book prior?
Yeah, read the book. There are cards, there's CDs. I will have like an online introduction to that training, which will just cover a lot of ground, so that we don't kind of get together for 2 days for the transmission and have some people sitting there thinking, I'm new to this. And I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page before we start. So I'll have details about that available early next year. And then the first actual transmission in person with me will be in the second half of the year. So all those dates will become available in the new year. Yeah. Did I answer your question?
Yes. Yes.
But yes, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And people will find too, I mean, you do all kinds of events, like I mentioned before, and you I mean, you're an international teacher. So although you mentioned you're in Australia, for people in other countries and here in the States, you come here as well. So just so people know, don't think you can't join.
Yes. I'm all over the place. So you'll be able, even, I mean, the last event I did a 3-day retreat in Perth, and we had people from the US coming. It was amazing. So sometimes, you know, wherever I go around the world, there's always people from somewhere else. And I love that.
Yes.
It's like bees pollinating the planet with beautiful, nourishing divine honey, you know. Yeah.
I have to tell you, Alana, I have been so looking forward to this, to meeting you. If nothing else, to thank you for your work, but it is, you know, it fills my heart to be able to share this, especially having you talk about it, because of how much I've loved the work that I've been exposed to of yours. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Thanks, Yolanda. Just lots of love and blessings for your work, and it's just beautiful what you're doing and how you're sharing your voice and helping people find their way. Lots of love.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for being here. We'll see you next time.